Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm being joined by John Dayton, who wanted to share some of his memories about Ralph Senensky, our Waltons director, who passed away recently. So please welcome John. Hello,
Hi,
John.
Judy.
Sorry we're meeting under sad conditions this time, but we'll make it a celebration of Ralph rather than a sad affair.
I'll tell you, ironically, um, if you go to Senensky.com, have you
Yeah.
all of our viewers should.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember last time we talked with Ralph, the three of us. I said, Ralph, do you remember I was in Hit and Run was the episode. And he had done this great shot of me with Lori, I think was her name. He said, no, I don't remember that. So I went to it, and I know had gotten checks for that. So I went on his blog and looked at the scenes. Yep, there it was. And I also remember something very funny that happened. Dick Van Patten was in the show, and there was some dialogue. It was an office, and so there's a glass wall and a door that opened and shut, and had a glass, pane in the door. And Dick and I were talking, and he put his hand right through the glass. In other words, the glass wasn't there, and he was just leaning on it. And Ralph started laughing. I don't know, Judy. This is so strange. I dreaded this day that it would come. And in looking at Hit and Run, I'm thinking to myself, was that the one where Dick put his hand through the glass, and I immediately thought, I'll call Ralph. Isn't it just strange that it seems that he would always be there to, he was the best prepared director I have ever worked with. And I believe that in one of our visits with Ralph, we show his page and the shots, and he had everything worked out to a T. Even I remember one weekend, one Saturday or Sunday, I was doing something on the stage, and I heard this noise, and it was, so checked it out. It was Ralph, and he was just going over his shots for the next day. Yes, he had so many friends in the business, and I don't know if you agree, but he was an actor's director. Do you think so?
I think because he and I talked a fair bit about acting and how, as a director, how he approached it and stuff. And I think it wasn't evident in the way that I sometimes thought of an actor's director, because his approach was not to tell the actor what to do, but to see what the actor was doing, and also very much of the thought that if it was working, if there's nothing wrong with it, you don't need to add input. Whereas at times, I think actors can feel like director's not saying anything. Is that good, or is that like, we're so rushed that I don't have time to direct?
I think that's good. And I believe that Ralph mentions that.
Mm-hmm.
If he went on to a show like the Waltons that had been was already established, then he wouldn't give you a direction, and you would say, well, my character wouldn't do that. I totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I just didn't necessarily recognize that for what it was at the time. And sometimes if I felt that a director giving me something that I wasn't already thinking about, like with some directors, like, they might just give me a little something and I go, oh, wow, I've enhanced what I'm doing. And actors can be insecure. And so sometimes we just need someone to say, love what you're doing, or that's great. Or, and sometimes I would be a little tentative about asking, because it was like, well, what if I say, is this working? If they go, well, yeah, sure, do what you're doing. It's like,
I was thinking of the first time I met Ralph was one of the early episodes that he did. I think it was The Chicken Thief, but I'm not positive.
I think that's the first one he did.
Okay. Yeah. That was the one where, wasn't that the one where Yancey Tucker had all those crazy animals? And or was that another episode?
I'm not sure how much of the animals we saw in The Chicken Thief. That was the one where he was stealing chickens from someone because some of his neighbors, they needed them. And then when he was arrested, all these people started giving chickens back to the guy, more than the guy ever had in the first place.
I think there was a scene in his house. Anyways, what I do remember is it had to be Ralph. That had to be the one. We put up chicken wire right below the camera, and had to, because we had chickens in there and all sorts of animals. And they started, it wasn't high enough, and we started getting loose animals all over the stage. And it's funny because Ralph was just even-tempered, and he was very soft. But when something went wrong, look out. He told me his reputation at CBS in the early years was that they would call him Thundercloud, meaning if he came in the office, you knew there was going to be a problem. And I do remember, oh gosh, Judy, we were shooting up at Pine Mountain. We were up, and it was that wonderful scene with Richard and Martha Corinne, where they're looking at the grave. It was very important, an important scene. We were up there, the mountains in the background, and for her to kneel down on the ground with Richard, and we were about ready to shoot it, and Ralph came over to me and he said, "Where's the gravestone? Where is the gravestone?" I said, "I don't know." And we checked, and they had left that darn headstone back at the studio. And there we were, 5,200 feet up. And was it Ed Graves? I'm thinking it was Ed. There wasn't even a way to get to, we went down to the nearest town, which was Gorman, and found a lumber yard. But by the time we drove all the way down the mountain and all the way back and had it done, cut out, it was impossible. So there we had the company up there, and Ralph just lost it. He just lost it. So what we ended up doing was somehow someone got a piece of wood and cut it, and Ralph had to shoot from the back, so because the front was just blank. It was an incredible scene with both Richard and
Yeah.
And I remember with Ralph, we were low and very low. I think just barely shooting over the top of the gravestone. And I remember when Beulah went down on her knees, she literally hit the ground hard with her knees. And I went, oh, like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh gosh, I hope that because I was right next to Ralph. Which brings up something else, and that is his willingness to share his knowledge with others. Now, there's certain directors that have secrets, and Ralph never did. He always, I was just a production assistant at that time, and doing a lot of things I shouldn't have been doing, but we had such a minimal crew. And then when we went up the mountain, it was really minimum. Yeah. But he was always willing. He'd always say, come here, let me show you what I'm doing here. And I also remember now, not the Waltons, but other shows that he did. He had a script supervisor that he loved, Lily LaCava. And when Lily passed, there's a trust fund over in the guild for that she set up. And she was the only one that could keep up with Ralph on his notes on the script. But he was always so kind to her. And that willingness to share, it meant a lot to me, because I could have been just said, well, you know what? All of our directors were kind to me. I can't think of one that was rude, but there was a lot of paperwork for me to do all the time. So personally, we became really good friends. And he was living up on Sunset Plaza, right above Sunset. And I never knew who I'd meet when I went to Ralph's house, but they were mainly actors. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if he had a dinner or just a little get together, he would invite actors over. I met so many people. Oh my gosh. And we always had fun. He'll never leave. he'll always be part of me
Hmm.
and part of the business.
Did I tell you I had a chance to actually spend an afternoon with him recently?
You wrote me, yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he really felt like he cared about the history of television. And he said he never felt comfortable with the saying things were like from Hollywood or whatever, because he just thought that had a different connotation to him, Hollywood, as opposed to his interest and passion and how he had seen really television evolve, because he was there kind of at the beginning of television, and the transition from live production, to recording and playing, and then being shown later. And so he really kind of wanted to talk to me about that. And I always appreciated that he appreciated what I've been doing here, and that he wanted some of these things documented. He's done such a beautiful job of documenting it on his blog, on his website. But, and then we did our last shoot together right at the end of September. So I have those last two stories that we talked about. He told me like 2 or 3 different stories, and he said, I think these 2. And so those were, kind of 2 stories he wanted to share about 2 different shows he worked on. And
was it Dr. Kildare?
Yeah, that was one of them.
Yeah. And I remember asking him, because he was a secretary at CBS, and all of a sudden he gets to direct an episode, which he had never done before.
Right.
And I said, weren't you nervous? And he said, no, because he knew the process so well. I remember, in life you remember certain things and not so much others. And we used to go at lunchtime. We would go and watch dailies, what was shot the day before. And so we'd order some, I think we ordered from a Chinese deli. It sounds weird, but we order sandwiches in, and then usually Earl would be there. And I remember so clearly this shot, and I believe so this is a Star Trek.
Okay.
And see what I mean? I'm not confusing them, but I worked on so many things. I'm sorry, it was at Desilu. Yep, it was there. And Ralph had done this shot of Shatner. And it was a very long speech for Bill, for Shatner. And Ralph just very slowly went in on Bill. I think he was leaning on a tree or something. And I was amazed at the performance. And I mentioned to Ralph, I said, that was extraordinary. And he said, that's why Bill gets the big bucks. I think of the directors on the Waltons, you just hit it right on the button. The idea was to get your 8.5 pages shot every day. And, some of the directors didn't care creatively about staging or anything. They just came in and shot and did it. I think in the 70s and part of the 80s, that was the job of the director. Just get in there, get it shot, and go home. You know, I don't know. Don't want to get emotional. So it's just that, Judy, those were good days. They really were.
Yeah. And
And
we were so lucky to have been part of it and, experienced it firsthand. And, and to know him, and you in particular, to have known him for as many years and be close friends for as many years as you were. I got lucky to know him in his final years and to have had the pleasure of getting, his stories and letting our audience know him and his amazingly sharp memory and recall, right up to the end.
I'm telling you, he'd say, okay, on Friday morning at 8:30, we did this. And it was like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, he just knew there's something special about that.
Yeah.
Something very special. I just hope that our viewers will take a look at, just go to Senensky.com and see the amazing list of shows that Ralph had done. And it's extraordinary. And then, as I was saying, the clips, he'll show clips and explain what happened in a scene.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing, your feelings about Ralph and that you wanted to contribute to this sort of legacy and tribute about his legacy and stuff.
It's got nothing to do with me and everything to do with Ralph. And these moments are going to occur where I'm going to want to pick up the phone and say, Ralph, did this really happen? Or, whatever. It was, when it comes to people who, when you're young and you're in the business, and it really is a business, to have people like Ralph Senensky and special people along the way, Earl Hamner, hello, who inspired us to be our best. There was none of this Hollywood stuff. So lucky to have people to look up to like that and see them be so successful. Ralph was a special, very special person to me. And I appreciate you asking me to share.
I want to thank John for joining me to share his special memories and feelings and about the relationship that he had with Ralph for many, many years. I will see you next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons. Thanks for watching.